Hello and welcome to the Sleepy Mythologist. Tonight we invite you to lie back, get comfortable, and let your thoughts float gently through the ancient skies of Mount Olympus. Before we begin our myth, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Whether you're beneath the stars in Greece, resting in a quiet corner of Canada, or unwinding in a cozy room in Brazil, I'm so glad you're here. Tonight's story is a strange and wondrous one. We'll travel back to a time before wisdom had a name, before even the gods fully understood their own power. It's the tale of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, war and strategy, who was not born as most are, but emerged, fully grown, from the very head of Zeus himself. Close your eyes now, and let the story begin. Far above the world of mortals, where the sky touches the heavens and the clouds drift like silver dreams, Zeus sat upon his mighty throne atop Mount Olympus. The winds were quiet that day. Even the birds, who usually sang through the mountain breeze, seemed to sense something was different. There was a tension in the air, subtle yet persistent, like the first ripple on the still water before the storm begins. Zeus, king of the gods, ruler of lightning and sky, stirred uneasily. He was not accustomed to discomfort. His very presence commanded order, and when he spoke, even the stars listened. But now something was wrong. A dull ache had taken root in his temples. Small at first, barely noticeable, but it grew stronger with each passing hour. It pulsed with a strange rhythm, not unlike the beat of a heart, but it was not his own. He rubbed his forehead gently, trying to ignore the sensation. He thought perhaps it was the strain of watching over both mortals and gods, or maybe it was the weight of the sky, heavy with the dreams and prayers of countless beings. But deep down, he knew this pain was different. It was not caused by battle or by worry, it came from within. And it was growing. He wandered through the halls of Olympus, silent and distracted. The other gods watched him with concern, but did not speak. They had never seen Zeus so quiet. The fire in his eyes, usually so bright and commanding, was dimmed, hidden behind the fog of something unknown. Every step he took echoed a little louder than usual. The marble beneath his feet felt colder, the air around him stiller. The pain sharpened. It was no longer just a headache. It was a pressure. As if something were pushing against his skull from the inside, living thing knocking gently at first. Then more insistently, more desperately. He pressed his hands against his temples. Sparks of lightning cracked from his fingertips, but the pain did not subside. He tried to call out, to summon the healers of Olympus, but even his voice seemed weakened by this strange force. And yet he remained proud. Zeus did not show pain. Not to gods, not to mortals. He was the Stormbringer, the lawgiver, the one who had swallowed his fear long ago when he consumed Meteor, the goddess of deep wisdom and cunning thought. She had once stood beside him, offering counsel and insight. But when a prophecy warned that she would bear a child more powerful than its father, Zeus had acted in fear. He had swallowed her whole, hoping to end the threat. And now this. He closed his eyes and saw strange visions. Light and shadow, armour and feathers. A spear glinting in the sun. He heard the clang of metal, but no battles were being fought. He heard a voice, clear, strong, feminine, but no one was speaking. And still the pain pulsed, deep and relentless, like the waves against the cliffs of eternity. It was no longer just a pain, it was a presence. Something was awakening inside him. The skies above Olympus began to shift. Clouds that had once drifted lazily began to swirl in slow circles. Thunder grumbled in the distance, not angry, but curious. The other gods looked up. Hera paused mid-sentence. Apollo's fingers froze upon his golden lyre. Even Ares, god of war, tilted his head to listen. Something ancient and powerful was stirring in the mind of Zeus, and the whole of Olympus felt it. Zeus stood in silence, breathing heavily, eyes cast upward. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from awe. For even he, in all his power, could not fully comprehend what was taking place within him. There was life inside his mind, something forming, something divine. Long before the pounding pain overtook Zeus, long before the skies rumbled and the gods grew silent, there was Metis. Metis was not just any goddess. She was the embodiment of wisdom itself. Her thoughts moved like rivers, graceful and deep, impossible to trap or predict. She was older than many of the Olympians, one of the ancient titans born of Oceanus and Tethys. And though the Titans had been overthrown in the great war that crowned Zeus as king, Metis had not fallen. She had risen. She became Zeus's counselor, his trusted advisor, the whisper in his ear that helped him shape the new world after the chaos of the old. While others ruled through force or fear, Metis ruled through clarity. She could see through illusions, she understood the subtle web of fate that bound all things. And for a time Zeus loved her for it. She was not like the other goddesses. She did not seek attention, she did not crave praise. She was quiet, sharp-eyed, and full of questions that pierced straight through the armor of even the mightiest gods. Zeus, proud and powerful, had never met a mind like hers. She challenged him, not with swords, but with thoughts. And in the quiet spaces between battles and storms they grew close. Their union was not one of loud passion, but of shared vision. Together they dreamt of a world ruled by order and reason, a world where chaos could be shaped into harmony. And when Metis became pregnant, Zeus felt a flicker of something he rarely allowed himself to feel, vulnerability. Then came the prophecy. It came quietly, as such things often do, a whisper carried by the wind, an omen etched into the bones of an ancient oracle. It said, "The child of Metis will be wiser than her father, and should she bear a second, he will rise up and overthrow the king of the gods." Zeus froze. The words clung to him like shadows. He had heard such warnings before. His own father, Cronus, had been overthrown by him after swallowing his children in fear. Zeus had ended that cycle of destruction, or so he believed. And now fate had turned its gaze upon him. He looked at Metis, calm, serene, thoughtful. Did she know? Had she foreseen this? She said nothing. She merely looked at him with eyes like still water, waiting for him to decide. Zeus could not bear the idea of being overthrown, not after all he had done to claim his throne. And so, despite his love, despite all she had given him, he acted. One evening, beneath a sky heavy with stars, Zeus called Metis to him. He spoke softly. He told her he needed her wisdom, as he always had. And when she came close, offering comfort, unaware of what Zeus stirred in his heart, he opened his mouth, and in a single swift motion swallowed her whole. There was no thunder, no lightning, only silence. The other gods did not know, or if they did, they said nothing. Perhaps they thought Metis had wandered away into the far corners of the world, as she often did. Perhaps they did not want to believe that the king of Olympus could do such a thing to one he had loved, but she was gone, or so he thought. What Zeus had not understood, what no prophecy had mentioned, was that Metis was already carrying their child when he swallowed her. A life had already begun to form, not in her body now, but within his. Deep inside Zeus's mind, Metis remained alive, not as a prisoner, but as a presence. Her voice became part of his thoughts. Her calm logic softened his temper. Her clarity lived within his dreams. And so did the child, a daughter, shaped not by flesh but by thought, began to grow in secret. She heard the crackle of Zeus's thoughts. She felt the pulse of his godhood all around her. And from within she watched, learning, listening, preparing. This daughter would not be born in the ordinary way. She was not like the children of mortals. She was forged in the crucible of divine intellect and sealed inside the most powerful mind in existence. Outside, Zeus began to change. He grew quieter, more pensive. The world around him continued, but something inside him had shifted. He could no longer hear his own thoughts clearly. They were crowded now, like a chorus in a darkened theatre, voices rising not in chaos but in quiet insistence. And always the pressure in his head grew. The prophecy had not lied. Metis would bear a daughter mightier than her father. And Zeus, despite all his power, had unknowingly become the vessel of his own transformation. Not his destruction, perhaps, but something far more mysterious. A birth of wisdom, a mind born within a mind. And high above the world of men, in the cloud-draped halls of Olympus, destiny waited. Time passed in ways that even the gods could not measure. Days and nights washed over the earth below, and seasons shifted gently across the mountains, valleys, and seas. But within the mind of Zeus, something else was unfolding, something timeless, delicate, and profound. Metis, though swallowed, had not perished. No prison could contain her mind, no darkness could dim her brilliance. She moved like a whisper through Zeus's consciousness, not trapped, but transformed. She had become part of him, woven into the very fabric of his thoughts, as seamless as breath. Inside this divine mindscape, Metis existed in a strange and hidden realm, neither of the body nor of the world, but of pure thought. It was a space unlike anything known to gods or mortals. There were no walls, no limits, just endless possibility. And in this place, she dreamed. Her dreams were not idle fantasies. They were ideas taking form, visions sculpted from wisdom, and from these visions a child was growing, not with the usual rhythm of flesh and time, but with the rhythm of purpose. The child did not slumber. She absorbed. She watched the way Metis's thoughts flowed like rivers of starlight. She studied the fragments of Zeus's divine reasoning that drifted through the air like echoes of thunder. This unborn daughter was already unlike any being the cosmos had ever known. She was forged not in a womb, but in a mind. Her body took shape from principles rather than particles, honor, clarity, justice, discipline. Her eyes formed from vision itself. Her bones were the structure of logic, and her heart beat in harmony with wisdom's pulse. She did not float blindly in darkness. She wandered the thoughts of two gods. She learned from her mother's insight and her father's power, and she grew, fully conscious, in this strange luminous solitude. Metis guided her gently. She whispered lessons without words, showing her daughter the patterns behind things, the way stars move in silence, the balance hidden within every storm, the cost of power without understanding. And the child listened. She listened to everything. She heard the roar of Zeus's doubts. She felt the tremble of his fears, the very ones that had led him to swallow her mother. And yet she did not resent him. She understood what fear does to those who carry great responsibility. She saw into him more deeply than even Zeus could see himself, and she began to take shape. She wore no crown, but bore the aura of command. She held no scrolls, but carried within her the knowledge of ages. Armour formed around her not to conquer, but to protect. A helmet of clarity, a shield of strategy, a spear of judgment, not for violence, but to pierce illusion. She would not be a goddess of soft, ornamental wisdom. She would be the guardian of just war, the champion of reason in the face of chaos. She would be calm in fury, deliberate in movement, and compassionate in judgment. From within the throne of the gods, the essence of Athena was taking form. Meanwhile, outside, Zeus began to sense strange shifts in his being. Thoughts came to him that were not entirely his own, refined, precise, elegant. Solutions to problems would arise suddenly in his mind, as if placed there. He began to speak with more depth, to pause before striking with thunder. Some believed he had become wiser. Others noticed a heaviness in his gaze, a quiet weight behind his decisions. But inside he was no longer alone. The presence of Metis was still with him, yes, but something else had joined her. A second mind, new and ancient at once. A presence that watched the world through his eyes and began to shape him just as he had once shaped the world. And the pressure in his head, it grew. It wasn't pain, not entirely. It was more like a swelling, a fullness, like a thought so vast it could no longer be contained. He would look out across the heavens and feel as though someone else was looking with him. When he listened to prayers from mortals, he could hear another silence beside his own. When he dreamed, he sometimes caught glimpses of a tall, radiant woman standing in the fog, silent, steady, waiting. Within him the child moved, and she was ready to rise not from a womb but from a mind, not as an infant, but as a goddess fully formed, born of thought, born of will, born of the divine marriage between power and wisdom. Still she waited, because even gods must wait for the right moment. And all of Olympus, though it did not yet know it, stood on the edge of a miracle. The heavens were unnaturally quiet. Clouds that once drifted in joyous procession across the blue sky now hovered in stillness, as if the wind itself was holding its breath. The birds that usually danced on the breeze had fallen silent, perching high in the trees with heads tilted skyward. Even the great sun, usually unshakable in its rhythm, cast its light more gently over Mount Olympus, as if dimming its brilliance out of respect or concern. Zeus stood alone at the highest point of Olympus, his hand pressed to his brow, his golden robe falling in loose folds around him. His great shoulders, once proud and unyielding, now slumped with the unbearable weight of a pain that no god could explain. The ache in his head had grown beyond description. It was no longer a sensation, it was a presence, a pressure so immense it felt as though the very sky was pushing down on his skull. Thunder crackled in the distance, not with rage, but with anticipation. The atmosphere was electric, filled with a nervous energy that made even the mightiest gods feel small. Something was coming. They could feel it in their bones, though they did not yet know what. The air itself was trembling. Zeus could barely speak. He wandered through the golden halls of Olympus like a dreamer trapped between waking and sleep. His thoughts collided and spiraled, tangled together like vines. Lightning flickered at his fingertips unbidden. Every movement felt foreign, like he was no longer master of his own body. He knew, somewhere deep within, that this was no illness. This was not a curse nor the wrath of another god. This was something far more mysterious, something being born, but he could not name it. The gods watched from a distance. Hera, usually fierce and commanding, stood with her hand clasped over her heart, worry etched into every line of her face. Apollo lowered his lyre and stared out across the sky as if searching for a sign. Poseidon's trident trembled in his grip, though the sea remained still. Even Hades, who rarely left the shadows, gazed upward from the underworld, his eyes narrowing with ancient knowing. Then from the depths of the throne room the voice of Zeus boomed, not with his usual thunderous command, but with desperation. A cry not of fear, but of surrender. The gods rushed to his side, but none dared touch him. He stood at the centre of the room, his eyes wide with a kind of distant clarity. "Bring Hephaestus," he said, his voice strained. "Bring the smith." Hephaestus, god of fire and forge, came quickly, his hammer slung over his shoulder. He had never seen Zeus like this. Broken, trembling, radiant with something he did not understand. Zeus turned to him, sweat lining his brow despite his immortal skin. "Strike me," he whispered. Hephaestus blinked. "My lord?" "Strike my head," Zeus repeated, louder now. "Split it open, do it now." Hephaestus hesitated. This was madness. No one, not even God, dared raise a weapon to Zeus, king of Olympus. And yet, the forge god could feel it too. The strange, swelling presence that seemed to reach out from within Zeus like a light behind a curtain. It wasn't pain that filled the room. It was expectation, destiny. Without another word, Hephaestus stepped forward, lifted his hammer high, and, with a single clean motion, brought it down upon the skull of Zeus. There was no scream, there was no blood, only silence. And then, brilliance. A crack of light split the air like dawn breaking through the darkness. From the centre of Zeus's forehead, a radiant beam shot forth, and within it, moving with the grace of inevitability, emerged a figure. She did not crawl, she did not cry, she leapt. Fully grown, clad in shimmering armour, with a shield in one hand and a spear in the other, the goddess Athena burst forth from the head of Zeus. Her helmet gleamed with celestial fire. Her eyes, fierce and clear, scanned the world as if she had always known it. Her feet touched the marble floor with no sound, yet the entire mountain trembled. The gods fell back in awe. No one spoke, no one moved. Here was a goddess not born of flesh but of thought, not shaped in the chaos of desire, but in the order of reason. Her very being seemed to hum with balance, discipline without cruelty, strength without pride, wisdom without arrogance. She looked around with calm certainty, as though she had simply arrived, as though the world had always waited for her. The silence was finally broken by a soft breeze that moved through the throne room, lifting the edges of her robe and stirring the dust at her feet. Then came a low, distant thunder, soft and approving, as if the heavens themselves were welcoming her. Zeus, whose body had gone still, slowly straightened. The pain was gone. In its place a strange stillness, a clarity he had never known. He looked at Athena, his daughter, and felt no fear, no regret, only reverence. For in her he saw not only Metis' brilliance, but something more. Athena stood tall, unshaken, untouched by the chaos from which she had come. She did not weep for her strange birth. She did not shrink from the gazes of the gods. She simply nodded once to her father, as if to say, "I am here. The world may now begin again." And with her arrival, Olympus changed. Forever. There she stood, Athena, radiant and silent, newly emerged, yet ancient in her gaze. Her armour shimmered with divine light, not forged by hand, but formed by thought. It clung to her like an idea given shape. Elegant, impenetrable, inevitable. Her helmet, etched with sacred patterns, crowned her brow like a second mind, and from her shoulder flowed a cloak that seemed woven from moonlight and reason. The gods of Olympus, so often unruly, boastful, and easily stirred to passion or rivalry, stood frozen as if time itself had paused to breathe her in. For this birth had not been ordinary. This was not a child wrapped in swaddling cloth, not a divine babe to be raised and taught. Athena had leapt from the head of Zeus fully formed, her body strong, her mind sharp, her presence impossible to ignore. She held her spear as though she had always wielded it, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a symbol of clarity, of judgment, of decision. In her other hand, a shield gleamed with the wisdom of countless futures, its surface reflecting not the present world, but the one that could be, if only truth and thought were given rule. Her eyes, oh, her eyes, they did not dart about in wonder like a newborn's. They were still assessing deep. She saw all that stood before her and understood it. In one glance, she absorbed the personalities of her divine kin. She saw Hera's suspicion and strength, Apollo's beauty and brightness, Ares' fire and recklessness, Demeter's quiet sorrow, and even Dionysus's hidden chaos, and still she was unmoved. Not because she lacked feeling, but because she understood it too well. Athena was the daughter of wisdom itself, shaped in silence, formed in thought, and awakened through force. She had not been taught how to think. She was thought. She had not learned how to fight. She was strategy. She had not been given grace. She was grace in its purest, most composed form. Zeus, now healed of the pain that had plagued him, looked upon her with something he rarely felt: humility. For he knew he had not truly created her, not with intention, not with control. She had emerged from a mystery he could never fully comprehend. In her he saw the legacy of Mete, the goddess he had tried to silence. And yet, from that act of control, wisdom had found its way back into the world, stronger and more visible than before. Athena turned to him, and for a long moment they simply looked at one another. No words passed between them. None were needed. In her gaze, Zeus saw a kind of gentle defiance, not rebellion, but independence, not loyalty, but clarity. She would not be his pawn nor anyone else's. She belonged to no war, to no marriage, to no fate but her own, and yet she would serve the world, not because she was commanded, but because she chose to. The gods slowly stepped forward, unsure of what to say, how to receive her, but Athena did not demand praise. She did not preen or boast. She simply stood, tall, calm, complete, and in that stillness, something extraordinary happened. Olympus grew quiet. That great shining kingdom of immortal egos and endless quarrels softened in her presence. She brought not just wisdom, but order. From the earth below, the mortals began to feel something shift, though they could not name it. The sun seemed warmer, not in heat, but in purpose. The winds carried new ideas, as though the air itself had learned how to think. Poets began to dream of cities governed not by strength alone, but by vision. Warriors began to sense that bravery was not just rage, but restraint. Artists felt their hands moved by more than beauty, by balance. Athena had not spoken a word, yet already she had changed the world. Eventually she would become the patron of Athens, a city devoted to knowledge and craft. She would inspire philosophers, guide generals, and appear in countless dreams as the symbol of hope through thoughtfulness. But in this moment, her first moment, she simply stood in her new form, like a quiet flame that would never be extinguished. She was not born to destroy, but to define. She was not born from love, but from the refusal to be forgotten. And though she had burst forth from the skull of the king of gods in a spectacle of thunder and light, it was in this stillness, in her calm, collected presence, that her true power revealed itself. A goddess of wisdom, not because she knew everything, but because she never pretended to. A goddess of war, not because she loved battle, but because she understood its place in the pursuit of justice. A goddess of strategy, because in a world full of force she had the courage to think before striking. She was Athena, and Olympus would never be the same. When the divine light faded and the thunder stilled, a strange quiet fell over Olympus. It was not the silence of fear, nor of confusion. It was something deeper, more sacred. The kind of stillness that follows revelation. The kind that settles in after the stars have shifted, and the world, though it does not yet know it, has been forever changed. Athena stood motionless, her feet planted gently upon the marble floor of the god's realm. Around her, the great columns of Olympus gleamed as though freshly forged, bathed in the last golden shimmer of her arrival. The wind, usually wild and playful, seemed to move more carefully now, brushing past her robes as if in silent reverence. Even the clouds, those restless wanderers of the sky, gathered, in soft formation above the mountain, drawn as if to listen, as if to learn. No one dared speak. Even the most talkative of gods found themselves unsure of their own voices in her presence. She did not demand this respect, it radiated from her, effortlessly. It was not born from arrogance or intimidation, but from a rare and quiet power. The kind of power that did not need to shout to be heard, the kind of power that came from within and made everything around it slow down, hush itself, and feel. Zeus remained standing, not in majesty, but in reflection. His body, once so heavy with pain, now felt strangely empty, as if something had been taken, but not stolen. Something had been fulfilled. The pressure that had once gripped his temples had vanished, and in its place was a clarity so sharp it almost frightened him. He could see more clearly now, not just the gods around him, but his own thoughts, his own fears. It was as if Athena had not only emerged from his head, but had left something behind. A lens, a stillness, a voice that echoed in his mind long after hers had gone silent. She moved now, slowly, gracefully, as if each step was part of a larger design. She did not rush to greet her father, nor did she run into the arms of any waiting gods. She simply walked across the great hall of Olympus, each footfall soundless, enhanced, as if the earth itself had softened beneath her to offer passage. Where she moved, the air felt cooler, calmer, cleansed. There was no ceremony, no divine fanfare or celebratory music. And yet the moment felt more sacred than any coronation. Athena had not come to be adored, but to exist, to be present in the realm of the gods, not as an addition, but as a necessity. She did not carry the weight of chaos, like Ares, nor the heat of impulse, like Dionysus. She was the balance between them, the still center of the storm. The other gods began to shift, slowly, uncertainly. Hera, regal and watchful, studied Athena with narrowed eyes, not in malice, but in curiosity. What kind of goddess is born like this, she seemed to wonder. What sort of wisdom grows in silence, in solitude, within the mind of Zeus? Apollo stepped forward slightly, tilting his head like a musician hearing a new harmony. He sensed something familiar in her stillness, a kind of rhythm not of sound but of thought. He did not speak, but he nodded once as if to say, "I see you." Even Ares, god of war and thunderous wraith, stepped back a pace. Not in fear, he did not fear, but in respect. He recognized the strength in Athena, and more unsettling still, he recognized the restraint, the precision, the knowledge that war without thought is simply destruction. She was not his rival. She was his counterbalance. Time, if it moved at all, seemed to do so with grace now, no longer rushing forward, but walking quietly beside her. Outside Olympus, the world responded, though it could not name the reason. Trees grew more evenly. Rivers carved more harmonious paths. The minds of philosophers stirred in their sleep. The hearts of leaders softened. The balance that had once tilted too often toward impulse now felt a gentle shift toward reflection. And still, Athena said nothing. Her silence was not emptiness. It was fullness, waiting. She did not speak until she had something worth saying. This alone made her different from many of her kin. For on Olympus, words were often weapons, tools of persuasion or performance. But Athena's speech would be like her presence, deliberate, measured, and rare. In the days that followed, she wandered Olympus not as a guest, but as one who belonged. She examined the forge of Hephaestus, not to marvel at the fire, but to understand its discipline. She walked the gardens of Demeter, asking quiet questions about the cycles of growth and decay. She stood with Artemis beneath the stars, her eyes mirroring the moonlight, unafraid of the wild or the unknown. but it was the moments she spent alone that defined her most. She would sit at the edge of Olympus, looking out over the world below, where mortals moved through their days in confusion and wonder. And she would listen, not to the noise but to the pattern beneath it, the heartbeat of civilization, the flickering light of reason in the dark. She heard their strees, their questions, their desire to know, to grow, to create, and she loved them for it, not with a mother's love or a lover's, but with something older and steadier, a devotion to their potential, to their minds. She would become their guardian, not of their bodies, but of their ideas, their cities, their principles, their dreams of justice. She would teach them to build with both hands and thought, to fight only when necessary and never without wisdom, to lead not through fear but through understanding. But for now she sat in silence watching, and the skies around her remained still, as if Olympus itself finally was listening. As the days passed and the echo of her divine birth faded into the quiet rhythms of Olympus, the true nature of Athena began to unfold, not in thunder or spectacle, but in the subtle, powerful ways that only wisdom can reveal itself. She did not need to assert her place among the gods with grand declarations or displays of might. Her presence spoke for her, and what it said was clear. Athena was not like the others. She was a goddess born of thought, of intellect sharpened by solitude, and forged in the deep silent chambers of the divine mind. Her power was not the kind that bent rivers or shattered mountains, it was the kind that shaped civilization, the kind that whispered into the hearts of leaders, sculpted cities from stone, and turned chaos into culture. She represented something Olympus had never seen before in such a pure form, a balance between the mind and the hand, between contemplation and action. Athena was not only a warrior, though she bore armour and spear. She was not only a thinker, though her mind was as vast as the sky. She was both, and she blurred the line between those two worlds with graceful certainty. To the gods of Olympus, who so often embodied raw forces of nature or singular emotions, she was a quiet revelation. In her, the fierce strength of Ares found discipline. The restless energy of Hermes found purpose. The luminous beauty of Aphrodite found clarity. Even Zeus, her father who ruled the heavens with thunder, found in her a calm that made his own judgments more measured, more just. She did not overthrow the old ways. She refined them. Mortals, though far removed from the divine halls of Olympus, began to sense her influence in ways they couldn't fully name. As shepherds traced new paths over hillsides and farmers organized their fields, something more than necessity guided them. A hidden order began to stir. Philosophers, in their humble homes, began asking questions that had no easy answers about truth, justice, and what it means to live rightly. Craftswomen and smiths found new precision in their hands. Poets found that their verses now danced with deeper meaning, as though another voice had joined their own. Athena, though high above them, was reaching gently into the world, not with force but with inspiration. She became known as the goddess of wisdom, but that word, wisdom, was far richer in her presence than mortals could grasp. It was not just cleverness or knowledge of facts. It was not memorizing the stars or reciting old laws. No, Athena's wisdom was something living, something rooted in experience and reflection. It was the ability to see beyond the moment, to understand that every choice, every action, echoes forward into countless unseen futures. She did not simply know, she understood. This is why she was also the goddess of strategy, not just in war, but in life itself. Where Ares charged into battle with fury and fire, Athena studied the terrain. She waited. She read her opponents. She anticipated. To her, victory was not about domination, but about minimizing harm while maximizing justice. In the art of war, she valued preparation over passion. Her spear was precise, her shield unwavering, and her gaze calm, even in the heat of combat. Because to Athena, war was not a game of glory. It was a problem to be solved with discipline, intelligence, and foresight. She did not glorify battle, but she understood its place in the world. And when she entered the field, it was never to conquer. It was to protect what must be protected, to correct what must be corrected. And yet she was so much more than a goddess of war. She was also the protector of cities, of the delicate web of laws, values, and customs that turned raw land into a place where people could live with dignity. She guided the builders of temples and libraries. She watched over courts of law and assemblies of thought. Where others saw confusion, she offered structure. Where others argued, she sought reason. She brought the gift of olive trees to the people of Attica, not just as a symbol of nourishment, but as a sign of peace, endurance, and harmony between humanity and the earth. Her name became a whisper in moments of doubt, a comfort to those who struggled not with monsters or storms, but with the quiet challenges of living well. Should I speak now or wait? Should I forgive or seek justice? Should I lead or step aside? These were the questions she helped answer. She did not live in temples of gold and marble because she needed praise. She lived in the minds of those who asked, "What is right?" She walked beside those who stood alone with the burden of leadership, who bore the weight of making decisions not for themselves, but for many. She was the fire behind the eyes of every wise ruler, every fair judge, every humble teacher. And yet she remained apart. Unlike many other gods, Athena never married, never bore children. She remained untouched by passion in its consuming form, devoted instead to the quiet and often lonely path of clarity. She was not distant because she lacked feeling, but because she saw too clearly what feeling untamed could do. She did not reject love, she simply understood its power and chose instead to embody a love of truth, of justice, of peace, hard won through thoughtful labour. In the great tapestry of Olympus, she was the thread of order, the line that made all the chaos meaningful. She never raised her voice, but when she spoke, even Zeus listened. She never sought dominion over others, but others followed her willingly. She was not born from desire, nor raised by the hands of the gods, but emerged from thought itself, already complete. Athena was the idea of wisdom made visible, and because of her, the world would never again be ruled by impulse alone. There would always be a place for the mind, for reason, for those who chose not the loudest path, but the truest one. And in every quiet decision made with care, in every moment of restraint, in every humble act of courage rooted in understanding, there she would be. Watching, guiding, waiting, deep within the immortal fabric of Olympus, where marble halls shimmered with eternal light and the air carried the weight of ancient thoughts. A question began to settle in the minds of the gods, one they dared not speak aloud. What had become of Metis? She had vanished from their sight long ago, swallowed by Zeus in a moment of fear wrapped in the guise of strategy. A decision made not with cruelty, but with trembling foresight, a reaction to the prophecy that haunted him, that Metis would bear a child more powerful than he. In consuming her, he believed he had mastered fate. He believed he had ended the threat, but fate, like wisdom, cannot be digested so easily. Now Athena walked among them, glorious, composed, unshakable, and though no one said it, everyone knew. She had come not only from Zeus, but from Metis, through Metis. Her sharp mind, her endless calm, her precise grace, these were not Zeus's alone, they were inherited. Echoes of another presence still lingered in every calculated step, every glance that weighed more than 1,000 words. The gods could feel it in her voice, even when she said little. They could sense it in her judgments, which never swayed to vanity or vengeance. She carried something older than Olympus itself, a wisdom not taught but transmitted through being. The legacy of Metis lived on in Athena, not as a memory but as a living force, and within Zeus, that truth began to take root. He had feared Metis because he knew her mind was deeper than his own. He admired her, yes, loved her even. But he had not trusted what he could not control. He had thought that by absorbing her, he could make her part of his dominion, reduce her power to something useful, but in doing so he had only ensured her survival in another form. And now she had returned, not as herself but as something far greater. Athena was not merely a child of Zeus. She was the living continuation of Metis' will. Her birth had not destroyed her mother's wisdom, it had amplified it, released it, given it form. There were moments now when Zeus would sit alone atop the clouds of Olympus, his hand resting gently against his forehead, not in pain, but in memory. He remembered the feeling of Metis' voice in his thoughts after he had consumed her, a steady current, a presence that offered counsel without command. He remembered the clarity that would occasionally rise in his mind unbidden, during moments of great turmoil. At the time, he'd believed it to be his own strength maturing. But now he understood. It had been her, it had always been her. And as Athena grew into her role, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as a goddess fulfilling a destiny, the gods began to realize that Metis had never truly vanished. She had simply changed shape. What Zeus had tried to contain had outgrown him. What he feared had become his greatest gift. Metis had not fought to escape. She had not cursed him, nor poisoned his mind. She had waited. She had nurtured the child within him, carefully, lovingly, with the same calm foresight that had always defined her. And that was perhaps her greatest lesson. True wisdom does not force its way forward. It waits. It grows in silence. It understands that even in the heart of fear, the seeds of truth can take root. Athena understood this. She carried it with her. Though she never spoke of her mother, perhaps because she had no memories in the human sense, she honoured her with every breath. She honoured her by existing. Every decision Athena made, every moment of restraint, every strategy devised not for domination but for peace, was a whisper of Metis echoing through time, not as a ghost, not as a lost goddess, but as a presence reborn through her daughter. And the gods, watching Athena, began to remember Metis not as the swallowed threat, but as the hidden architect of something far greater. They began to speak of her again, not with sorrow or fear, but with awe. Her disappearance had not been an end. It had been a transformation. There were those who whispered that Metis had known all along, that she had foreseen the prophecy, foreseen Zeus's choice and chosen not to fight it, that she had allowed herself to be consumed so her child could grow not in her body, but in the very mind of Olympus's king, that she had, in her final act, shown the deepest kind of wisdom, the willingness to dissolve for the sake of something greater. This was the legacy that lived on in Athena, not merely power, but restraint, not merely intelligence, but understanding, a refusal to become corrupted by strength, and a quiet mastery of self. Athena, for all her divine radiance, never flaunted her lineage. She never reminded others that she had been born from the king of gods, nor that she carried the soul of one of the most revered titans within her. Her greatness did not need reminding, it was felt. And in that stillness, where Metis had once waited, growing a child inside the very mind of Olympus, a kind of peace had taken hold. Not a passive peace, but a vigilant one. A peace earned through foresight, through sacrifice, through the slow, deliberate unfolding of thought into form. Athena was more than a goddess now. She was a bridge between eras, between the wild forces of the old gods and the refined order of the new. She was the silent victory of Metis, and through her, wisdom walked the world again. The halls of Olympus, though grand and eternal, had always echoed with rivalry. The gods were powerful, yes, but they were not without pride. They quarrelled over love, over honour, over influence. They challenged one another with booming voices and flashing tempers, their thunderous disputes shaking the skies and stirring the oceans below. Every god and goddess, in their own way, believed themselves essential, irreplaceable, divinely supreme in their domain. So when Athena emerged, serene, composed, and fully formed from the mind of Zeus, it was not simply her miraculous birth that stunned Olympus. It was the effect she had on the gods who bore witness. At first they were silent, shocked. Even for immortals who had seen the world shaped and reshaped, who had watched titans fall and monsters rise from shadows, the sight of Athena had unsettled something in them. Not fear exactly, but a recognition of something entirely new. She stood apart, not only in how she had come into the world, but in how she carried herself within it, and in the days that followed. As Athena took her place among the Olympian pantheon, each god and goddess began to form their own thoughts, some aloud, some kept in secret, about the one who had been born not from union, but from intellect itself. Ares, god of war, was the first to stir. He bristled at her very presence, though he could not have said why. He, who revelled in chaos and the blood rush of battle, found something disquieting in her gaze. It was not contempt, but calculation. Athena did not fear war, nor did she flinch at the sight of a sword. But she did not glorify it. She approached it as one might a dangerous equation, measured, prepared, detached. To Ares, whose power came from instinct and rage, this made her dangerous in a way he could not touch. He had always known how to fight. She knew when to fight and when not to, and that knowledge made her stronger than him in ways he refused to admit. Hera, Queen of Olympus, watched Athena with a critical eye. She too had been born of great lineage, daughter of Cronus and Rhea, and she understood what it meant to carry legacy like a crown of fire. Hera was the goddess of marriage, of family, of loyalty, concepts built around structure and lineage. And here was Athena, a goddess born of no mother's embrace, no traditional bond, no ceremony. She had come from Zeus's mind, and in that strange birth Hera saw something unsettling. A daughter not of union, but of singular will. Still, even Hera could not deny the dignity with which Athena moved, or the way she brought a kind of equilibrium to the divine court that had long lacked such balance. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire, studied Athena with a mixture of fascination and quiet resentment. Athena had no interest in vanity. She wore armour instead of flowing silks, spoke rarely of love, and seemed untouched by the passions that ruled so many gods and mortals. Yet despite her indifference to appearance, Athena possessed a kind of beauty that no charm could replicate, a beauty born of purpose, of stillness, of clarity. It was the kind that did not shimmer on the surface but burned deeply from within, and even Aphrodite, with all her allure, could not help but notice that mortals spoke of Athena with a reverence usually reserved for love itself. Hermes, quick-witted and curious, was perhaps the most intrigued. He saw in Athena not a rival, but a mind to challenge his own. He, the god of communication and cunning, recognized the depths of her strategy and the way her thoughts layered upon one another like carefully stacked stones. He would sometimes speak to her in riddles, testing her, and she would respond with answers so elegant, so concise, that he could only laugh with delight. "You think like silence," he once told her. "Quiet, but impossible to ignore." She did not smile, but she nodded. Apollo, radiant with light and music, felt a kinship with her. Both were gods of clarity, he of prophecy and poetry, she of wisdom and war. Their paths often ran in a parallel, and though their domains were different, they both understood what it meant to hold truth like a blade. He found comfort in her steadiness. She found in him a reflection of the beauty that can come from harmony, from reason made visible through art. Even Artemis, wild and solitary, respected Athena. They had different ways of walking the world, Artemis through forests and moonlit glades, Athena through the minds of strategists and lawmakers, but they shared a devotion to independence. Neither sought the approval of others, neither played by the rules of those who expected goddesses to be soft and yielding. And in that quiet understanding a bond was formed, one of respect, not closeness. But there were others, less secure in themselves, more consumed by jealousy, who looked upon Athena and felt a sting. They saw the way mortals began to speak her name in prayer, not begging for passion or gold, but for wisdom, for strength of mind, for guidance in times of turmoil. They watched as philosophers carved her likeness in marble, as warriors painted her symbol on their shields, not to glorify violence, but to remember restraint. They saw cities arise in her honour, not merely to worship her, but to live according to her principles. And quietly they resented it, not because Athena had taken anything from them, but because she had not asked for anything at all. She had not demanded temples, she had not seduced mortals with promises of pleasure or wealth. She had not threatened or manipulated or boasted. She had simply been. And in being herself, utterly, fearlessly, she had drawn the world to her. This more than anything disturbed the gods who lived on spectacle. Athena's influence was not loud. It did not erupt like volcanoes or roar like tempests. It moved like water beneath the surface, shaping the land slowly, silently, and forever. Her kind of power was harder to see but impossible to undo. And so the gods reacted in their own ways, some with admiration, some with suspicion, some with envy. But none could ignore her, because Athena had not come to Olympus to compete. She had come to complete something, to fill the gap between impulse and reason, to stand where others wavered, to speak when silence would cause harm, and to remain silent when noise would only deepen confusion. She was the mirror they did not ask for, but once she arrived, none could help but see themselves more clearly in her presence, and that, perhaps, was her most divine gift. Night fell over Olympus with a hush as soft as a whispered secret. The brilliance that had bathed the mountain top during Athena's arrival slowly faded into deep indigo skies speckled with stars. The marble halls, still glowing with divine light, seemed more at ease now, their columns less rigid, their silence less strained. The winds no longer circled in confusion. They moved gently now, like lullabies curling through the air, brushing against golden statues and olive trees alike. Even the ever-burning torches along the pathways of Olympus flickered more softly, as if unwilling to disturb the tranquillity that had settled over the realm. The gods returned to their quarters in thoughtful quietude. No feasts were called, no hymns were sung. The grandeur of Olympus, which so often celebrated conquest, revelry, and divine spectacle, had, for once, surrendered to stillness. Not out of fear, nor exhaustion, but because something within each god had shifted, ever so slightly. It was as if a long-forgotten truth had been remembered, a truth that could not be shouted or carved into stone but only felt in the silence that followed revelation. Athena, the newly born, did not seek a throne, nor a palace adorned with jewels. Instead, she stood on the edge of the mountain, gazing out over the mortal world below. The stars reflected in her eyes, but her attention was not on the heavens, it was on the earth. She watched the villagers sleeping in the valleys, the cities burning oil to finish their scrolls, the lone travellers whispering prayers into the wind. She felt the pulse of humanity, that fragile, flickering thing, more precarious and beautiful than even the Olympian torches, and she loved it. Not with possessiveness, but with devotion. She saw the carpenter trying to balance perfection with practicality. She saw the magistrate torn between justice and compassion. She saw the young girl staring at the sea, wondering what kind of world could be built with her hands. She saw doubt. She saw hope. She saw minds reaching forward, stumbling and rising again. And in those moments she understood her place. She was not born to dominate the gods, nor to outshine her siblings in the games of pride and ambition. She had not come to replace her father, nor to avenge her mother. Her existence was not a rebellion, it was a resolution. Athena had emerged at a time when both gods and mortals were losing their balance. The scales of Olympus, long tipped toward chaos and impulse, now began to settle toward reason. Not a cold, distant reason, but one that saw with both the eyes of strategy and the heart of compassion. Below her, a night breeze stirred the olive trees planted on the slopes of the mountain. Their silvery leaves shimmered like quiet stars. Athena knelt beside one, placing her hand on its bark, and felt a kindred spirit in its rooted strength. The olive tree would become her symbol not by decree but by destiny. It was her reflection, enduring, nourishing, silent and strong. Far behind her, Zeus stood quietly, watching. He had said little since her birth, his mind still grappling with the enormity of what had taken place. But as he looked at his daughter, no, at their daughter, he felt something unexpected. Peace. He thought of Metis then, not with guilt, but with a kind of reverence. He saw now that her wisdom had not vanished when he swallowed her in fear. It had simply gone deeper, taken root in the one place it could not be destroyed. Thought itself. And now, standing before him, was the living proof that wisdom cannot be alienated. It will wait, it will endure, and when the time is right, it will rise. He approached Athena, and for a long moment, they stood together without speaking. The night was still around them. Far below, the mortal world turned in quiet slumber. Above them, the stars moved across the heavens in urgent rhythm. Finally, Zeus placed a hand on her shoulder, not with authority, but with acceptance. "You will not be like the others," he said, his voice low. "No," Athena replied, calm and certain, "but I will serve what they all protect. Order, balance, justice, not by force, by thought." He nodded. "You were born from my mind, but you have exceeded it." She did not smile, but there was a light in her eyes that seemed to soften the very air. Zeus turned and left her, disappearing into the night shadows, content for the first time in memory. And Athena remained. She did not need sleep, she did not need rest. She was rest, she was the calm that came after the storm, the breath after the decision is made, the silence that arrives when wisdom has spoken. The world was noisy, and it would become noisier still, but within her was the eye of the storm, still observing, steady. As the moon traced its silver path across the sky, Athena sat beneath the olive tree, her spear beside her, her shield resting against the earth. She did not close her eyes, but let them drift slowly over the world, watching, thinking, guarding. And so the night deepened, and the stars twinkled, and the world slept, and wisdom newly born watched over all.